Court Cheshire Home on the 17th of April 1996. They're in conversation with the archivist Jill Roberts. So Bill and Peggy, you were involved with Leonard Cheshire's foundation way back in the early days of the old house at Lee Court, the house that saw Arthur Dykes, the first resident of the foundation. Bill, can you tell me something about the first contact you had with Leonard Cheshire? Did you know him from the war, or what was it made you go to Lee Court?
Well, the thing what made me go to Lee Court was I'd just finished my national service and I'd been ambulance driving, and when I had finished my national service I thought I would like to take up nursing. So I went to my local employment office and told them what I wanted to do. And they said, well, a good Captain Cheshire's been in here and he wants somebody to help him up at Lee Court.
Oh, right.
So they sent me up there. And so I first came in contact with good Captain Cheshire by meeting him at the front door.
Well, he actually opened the door to you, did he?
Well, no, the door was already open because it was in June. It was quite a nice sunny day.
Right. Was it obviously the first time you'd actually seen him in the flesh, as it were?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
How did he strike you? What was your first impression?
Well, it was very difficult really because I sort of didn't know what it was all about anyway, and I didn't know about too much before I knew what it was all about.
Didn't he explain it to you?
Well, no, not really.
What did he say it was about then?
He just said, oh, well, we're a nursing home, we want some help. And we had a nursing sister who was upstairs who was actually suffering with, had TB, and she used to run the nursing side from her bed. So the first job he gave me was a great big pile of washing up in the kitchen. And being I wanted to start a nurse, I didn't know much about it anyway, so he thought that was a good idea.
A good starting point.
A good starting point in that way.
Right. What was your Peggy? What was your first contact with Leonard Cheshire?
Well, I came to Lee Court because although my husband had worked here, he had a break of service from here, and he worked at Littlefoot Sanatorium, and that's where I met him. And then he came back to Lee Court, and then I came back and joined him. They were needing staff, and I'd gone home to my home in Essex for a bit. My husband then rang up and said, come to Lee Court, they need us, need somebody, so I came. Well, it was a wonderful old house, a beautiful house with all oak panelling, all in the dining room area and sitting room areas, a wonderful staircase, one of these large ones where they used to say a horse and cart could have driven up, it was so wide. And we used to carry all the residents upstairs, because although there was a lift, it wasn't a passenger lift, and you wound it up by hand, and it weighed so much, it was heavier to wind that up by hand than actually carry your residents, so you carried everybody upstairs.
Not one person to one resident, I mean, it must have been...
No, there were two. I mean, you'd have two people, and you'd pick them up top and tail and carry them up the stairs.
But was the old house, I mean, I've always thought of the old house as being really decrepit and dilapidated, and was that the impression you got when you went into the front door?
No, I didn't get that impression at all. No, you just felt it was a stately Victorian home. I mean, not terribly well furnished, obviously, because there wasn't the means to furnish it. But very inconvenient to work in because, I mean, upstairs the floor level wasn't level all the way. You went round a corridor and you went down a stair, and so it was inconvenient. And then the bathroom that we used for the residents doubled up as sister's office. So you had the bath in the corner with a screen round it, and sister sitting at her desk in this room. And that was quite something. Yes.
So we're not talking about leaking roofs and cracks in the wall.
Well, we may have had some cracks in the wall, but not leaking roofs, certainly not. No, it was the foundations that subsided. Yes.
It was the foundations that forced the move, was it?
That's right. Yes.
Right. Okay. Arthur Dykes, a famous famous man in the history of the foundation, the first resident, with hindsight. Did you meet him, Bill? Or?
No.
What?
I think he must just died about 7 or 8 months before I came. I think he died in 48.
Yes, he did. I think in the August. I think.
August, and
yeah.
I came in 49.
Right.
So,
Right.
Yeah. And his name was still alive, you know.
Yes, his fame. Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
right.
What about the second famous resident, Granny? Can't remember her surname. Wilkes.
Granny, there's Granny Wilkes, but the oldest one was Granny Haynes.
I think it was Granny Haynes.
Granny
I
Haynes,
remember,
yeah.
What was she like?
Oh, she's quite a nice lady, but you know, she used to say a few naughty things to you.
Did she? Was she the one that GC used to make peel the potatoes?
Well, he could have done just before I came, but you know, because I remember being on night duty one night because we had no electricity. We had paraffin lamps and candles, and no heating except these little coal fires, provided you didn't run out of coal.
Oh, what about hot water?
Well, we had an old boiler downstairs, which is next to the kitchen,
Yeah.
and that was the only thing we had. But you had to keep stoking that up, or else you didn't get any hot water, you see, so anybody did that.
Goodness me. So this night you remember?
And I was actually dead scared, you know, that on my own up there, just running around with a candle and a paraffin lamp. And I heard the thump. I thought, oh, you know, that frightened me, that did. Then I heard it again and again, so I managed to pick up courage with this old paraffin lamp, go to this door, and it was in this room, see, and it was Granny Haynes. About 2 o'clock in the morning, she felt cold, so she got up, went to this old fire, and tried to put knobs of coal on. And she kept dropping it. Of course, when I went and saw her, this paraffin lamp, she was absolutely covered with black dust.
So you had to have a bath?
I had to wash her, put her back into bed.
What was the matter with Granny Haynes? Was she elderly?
Elderly, yeah.
And were there any other residents? There must have been. How many residents were there when you moved in?
I think there's been about 30 old adults.
That many?
About that old.
Goodness me. And how many staff, Peggy, was?
I can't really remember staff numbers.
1, 2, 3, about 6.
Yes, so
But of course, we had downstairs, you see, we had a lot of mobile sort of convalescent TB patients that are walking about.
Right.
In the peacock room.
Yeah.
Big curtains with peacocks over them.
curtains.
What they
It's
got?
called, and it was called the peacock room,
Yeah.
where the TB people were.
Right.
Yes.
So they didn't need quite so much attention as the...
No.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, the men's ward downstairs, how many were there? About 10 men in that room
10,
downstairs.
In one room.
In one room, in one large downstairs room, about 10 men.
And
yes.
the bathroom there was just a bath stuck in an outside conservatory, you know, in the backyard, and it was freezing in the winter.
Oh, bless it was. Goodness. Where did these people come from? Because there couldn't have been any sort of formal application procedure or vetting procedure or anything. Where did they come from? Who paid for them? Where did you get the money from? How was it run?
Well, I'm not sure, but I think if you see Francis Jerram,
Yeah.
Francis will be the person who will
Yeah.
be able to tell you all the things about finance and how the resident actually came to come here, because this was her thing.
Right, yes.
So I think she's the person to be able
I
to
think
tell you
so.
that.
Okay.
Mm.
And she had contact, I think she worked at St Thomas's Hospital, I think, when she came there. And I think, you know, she had contact there somewhere.
So Frances Jerram, who was the almoner at that time, had been there. She was there when you arrived.
She
So she was
was,
very
yes.
much there from the beginning then.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
She-
think she must have come in sort of late 49.
Right.
I should say around about September time, well, I can remember anyway.
Yeah. Okay. And what, thinking about Leonard Cheshire himself at this time, What do you think his aims were? It must have been so difficult to look after disabled people under those circumstances. Did he worry? You must have had crises, for instance. Where did your money come from? Was Leonard Cheshire worried about these crises? Or?
No, it didn't appear to be at all. I mean, I think he just hoped.
Hoped and prayed that everything would just come together somehow, yes.
I think the local tradesmen were quite good, because we used to get a lot of our groceries and that from the little stores in Rake, and they were very good. And a lot of the bread used to come from the local as well. The only problem I had right in the early days was that I had to go down to the village of Liss and get some paraffin, and the chap says to me, when you pay for last week's, he says, I'll give you some more. After a talk, like we got some,
Dear. So where did the money come from? Did you raise funds? You had a fete, was it?
We had a fete in the old when we were still in the old house, that we had that first fete, didn't we? Yes. We had a terrible thunderstorm in the middle of it.
Right.
Oh,
Yes,
dreadful, yes.
But was Leonard Cheshire, did he like the idea of raising funds locally, or was he quite shy of publicity?
I think he was quite shy of publicity because he just didn't want publicity at all.
He was a very humble man. This is the impression that I had of him. He was a very humble
He always said,
with a wonderful sense of humour.
Can you think of any instances of his sense of humour?
Not back in the early days, no. I had quite a lot of contact with him in the latter years of his life when he wasn't so well and he was staying at Laundry Cottage. He used to ring me up and I used to go up, and also when his father, the professor, was there, you see, I used to often go up, the professor would ring up and say, oh Peggy, come up and see me, I'm not well, or I've hurt my hand, or I've done something or another, and I'd pop up and see him and have a drink with him in the evening, and that was quite a business with the professor in the evening, because they live in Laundry Cottage,
which is in the grounds of
which is just up the lane. It was two tiny cottages made into one, and the professor was a man who had a routine with everything. And
just to explain for the tape, the professor is Leonard Cheshire's father.
Oh yes, the professor is Leonard Cheshire's father, and he had this wonderful routine with everything he did. He was a professor of law. And I used to go in the evening after duty about 9 o'clock, and he'd be sitting by the fire, and he'd say, you're going to have a drink, Peggy? Yes. And he was 90 plus, and he'd be poking at this fire, and I was worried sick that he'd fall in it. And then he used to explain to me how that at a set time, I can't remember now exactly, but at 10 o'clock he would turn everything off downstairs, he would go upstairs, he'd run his bath, he'd get in it at 10:15, he would sit in it for so many minutes, he would get out of it and he would get into bed, he would read his book for a set number of minutes, and he did everything like this to time, yes. But he was a wonderful gentleman.
Was Leonard Cheshire like that? Had he caught these very routine, disciplined habits from his father? Or was he more easygoing?
Not really sure.
Thinking back to the old days.
What was interesting, though, when he used to come and stay in Laundry Cottage after the death of his father, he used to come over here to collect his meals with his little cardboard box, stand in the lunch queue. Because he was GC, he didn't just walk up and get his lunch. He stood in the lunch queue with all the staff, with his little cardboard box, collect his lunch and take it back to Laundry Cottage and have it. Yes. And he had a wonderful memory, because if somebody new had appeared as a resident or a member of staff since his last visit, he would remember, he'd come over and say to me, quite often I'd have my lunch, Peggy, who was that over there in that blue jersey? And he'd go over and speak to them. And he knew everybody.
And in the early days, just thinking again about this idea of fundraising and publicity, Leonard Cheshire was very famous. He was a very well-decorated RAF pilot, a hero, a national hero. He could easily have traded on that to raise funds for what he was doing. Did he, Bill? Did he, Bill?
Well, no, not really, but I remember one day the phone had rang and I'd answered it. It was just an ordinary call box in the main hall, which I answered, and there's a gentleman on the phone saying, we're just checking up on people during the war were well decorated, and we would like to know if the group captain is here, what's he doing? And I said, well, it's a nursing home at the moment, and what I'll do then was hand you over to Mrs. Jerram, who gave him the full story, I think. But I remember the next day, these cars sort of rolled up into the front entrance, and out jumped these about 3 chaps with cameras, and they were sort of taking photographs all over the place, you know.
Without asking permission, or?
Well, I don't really know. They just went in and said, can we see some? Well, I think it was Mrs. Jerram at the time, and that was it. But I don't think they saw the group captain. I can't remember.
I was going to say, did Leonard Cheshire take advantage of it even then?
I don't think so.
No.
But
No.
I remember about maybe a week or 10 days later, because we used to go down to the South Lodge and pick the mail up. And from that piece of news in the News Chronicle, then post started arriving, and there was sort of money in it, cheques in it, and you know, I remember picking up one little parcel, and I think it was magazines. When they opened it, there was just full up about £100 notes, I think, and from then on, things sort of started to snowball, you know. Other people started taking in interests.
So it was an article in the News Chronicle. Do you remember about the date?
Well, it must have been in 49.
Yeah, 1949.
Yeah.
Do you remember the month? Winter,
could
summer?
have been September, October time.
Right.
That time.
Okay, it'd be interesting to see if we can get a copy of that.
Yeah.
And see what they said. So he didn't court publicity at all, obviously, which must have made it a lot more difficult in terms of finding the money to pay for food, as you've already said. That was difficult sometimes, hand to mouth. What about paying the staff? Peggy, were you?
Well, no, one didn't always know if you would get your wages at the end of the week, and of course we did work for an absolute pittance in those days. As I said, you didn't know if you'd get your wages, you didn't know if there was going to be food on the plate for, not necessarily for the staff, well, for some staff who lived in, but for the residents, you just didn't know. But somehow somebody always seemed to turn up at the door with a box of groceries, a basket of vegetables, or something like this, yes.
Staff must have been very loyal to stay under those circumstances. Was Leonard Cheshire a good leader? Well, he must have been, because he'd had the experience in the RAF. Did they feel loyalty? Did you feel loyalty to him?
Oh yes, you felt loyalty to him, certainly, yes.
Was it?
And I suppose because it was a new venture too, people were interested. Because it was a new venture, I mean, it was, were not homes for disabled in those days.
No provision at all?
Well, very little, you know.
Yeah. I think
for disabled, for people from the services, yes. I mean, obviously the services had their home, but for the ordinary sort of people, there weren't, no.
People often used to think that Leonard Cheshire's homes were for ex-servicemen, didn't they?
Well, they did, and I think this was why we had all the problems when we went to Rome for that family gathering that you probably know all about, that we had problems with hotel accommodation and things, and I think this was really what it was. This is my idea of what it was, that they didn't want us, because when they saw how heavily disabled a lot of people were, people on stretchers, people in their beds, very disabled, I think they thought, Leonard Cheshire, they're going to be war wounded, you know, an arm missing, or a leg missing, an eye missing maybe. But when they really saw the disability of these people, I just feel they couldn't cope with it. Because I know for a fact that hotel had it in their local papers in Rome, saying how they've got all these people coming out from all over the world, these disabled people. Because I had a friend who worked in Rome at the time, and she wrote to me and said, I hear you're coming out and you're going to stay at whatever this hotel was called. And then when we got there, they didn't want us. And you know, you've heard the story of all what went on there.
Wally Sullivan has done a tape.
He has
and
on that,
explained
yes.
it.
Yes.
Yes, terrible.
But that was,
You think that misconception
I'm
was
sure
behind
that was a lot was to do with it, yes.
It's funny, isn't it? Leonard Cheshire did his utmost to try and put people on the right track as far as that's concerned. And he said over and over again in public, didn't he, that his homes were not just for ex-servicemen.
Oh, yes.
Or not just for Catholics, which is another idea that people...
they're non-denominational. Yes.
I guess I suppose it's it's these myths that take root and people are reluctant to let go of them.
Well, they do, I think, because people knew what a devout Roman Catholic he had become, that they just sort of tend to take it for granted that the homes are for Catholics, yes.
So we're mid-50s now, thinking of mid-50s, and you've been in the old house, well, the old house has been used for what, 6 years? 5 or 6 years? And the time comes when you're going to move out. How was that funded, that move? Do you remember the circumstances? Because it must have been massively expensive. We're sitting now in an extension to the house into which you moved then, which must have been very modern in the mid-50s.
Very modern in those days, not anymore, but yes.
How was it built? How did all that happen?
Well, the Carnegie Trust built it. They normally build libraries, but they stepped in and funded the money for what I now know as the main wing.
Mm-hmm. And how long did it take for it to be built? Do you remember?
About 2 years, I think.
About 2 years. Yes. Meanwhile, you were still in the old house.
That's right.
Yeah, which is slowly becoming more and more dilapidated, I suppose.
With the foundations crumbling at the front of the building. Yes.
So the day came when you moved. What do you remember? Was that 1955?
I think it was 55.
I think it was.
1955.
Yeah.
And then shortly after that, the Queen Mother came to visit you.
She officially opened the building, yes.
Do you remember that day? That must have been a wonderful day.
That must have been, yes, it was a wonderful day. I mean, we all received our official invitations to attend. And obviously there were police and things all on the drive, directing the traffic and stopping people coming up unless you had to show your invitation to actually be able to come up the drive, yes.
And the local school children.
Yes.
Were they involved as well?
Well, they sort of lined up outside,
And then each member of staff, you stood with a particular group of residents to look after them, And I always remember I had a resident called Basil. Basil had Parkinson's disease. And Basil, his great thing was to fall over backwards and his legs go up in the air. Somebody spoke to him. And I was terrified that when the Queen Mother got to us, that Basil would fall over backwards and so his feet go up in her face or something. But he didn't. It all went off well, yes. Yes.
How would the Queen Mother become interested? Because now, of course, the Queen is the patron of the foundation. So there's been royal interest right from the beginning. And perhaps that stemmed from Leonard Cheshire's, again, his career in the RAF.
I should think so, yes.
I thought so. I'm not certain how she came to be asked to.
And this building now, we're in 1996, so it's been up for 40 years?
That's
over
right.
40 years.
Yes.
And you stayed here for how long? When did you leave?
I went in 65.
Right, and Peggy?
Well, I stayed on, but not all the time, because obviously we've got a family, we've got 4 children, and so although I was here for 42 years from the beginning till the time I left, I wasn't there completely all that time. I had my family, but I came back. I did a period of night duty for 4 years, and the last I did was 20 years. Actually, I was wing sister on the upstairs floor here for 20 years.
Well, you must have noticed changes, looking at it today and thinking about it when you first moved in. I suppose people say that the main change is the privacy that the residents have now.
Oh, yes,
and the freedom that they have.
Yes.
Does that strike you?
Very much so, yes, because when you think that when they were sharing 4 to a room, you'd got no privacy at all. Whereas now everyone has their own individual rooms, they furnish them the way that they wish to have them furnished. Whereas before it was, whatever was there. In fact, there was so little room. You had a locker by your bed and a small wardrobe in the corner, and at the bottom of each bed was a piece of furniture which was a sort of desk come chest of drawers, I suppose. There were drawers in it and the top flapped down so you got a writing space. And that was each bed had those same pieces of furniture. And
very
then of course
regimented.
Very regimented. And then of course you had a hoist to lift which was attached to the ceiling, electric hoist. Well, of course, to start with, we didn't have any hoists in the early days. You lifted everybody everywhere.
Like in the old house?
In the old house, you lifted everybody. And when we first came here, and then we had the portable hoists, you know, that you ran around with from bed to bed. Well, then eventually the coming of the electric was wonderful. But in the four-bedders, you had like a track, like a rail track all around your room, and you just had to run the hoist from bed to bed. But this wasn't convenient because people who came in late, but the bed hoist would be over their bed, but the next bed to them wasn't going to be the person getting up in the morning, so it was running round the room over the top of people's beds, waking them up.
Not ideal.
And of course the same at night. When you were on night duty and you answered a bell at night, when there were four beds, you went in with a torch to do whatever was necessary to turn people or whatever attention they needed, trying to be as quiet as could be without waking the others up. Where now, in their own rooms, I mean, you can go in, you can put lights on, you can talk, and
very different.
and so from the staff point of view, that's much easier than having to creep around with a torch. And but thinking of night duty, my recollection of night duty in the old house, I was on night duty alone, of course, like we were, and of course the staircase, the duty room where we sat, matron's office come bathroom, and was at the top of the front stairs, and the stairs used to creak, and we had several cats in the house, and they would run up and down the stairs at night, frightening the life out of you. But then one night I suddenly could hear sort of shuffling going on, and suddenly in the doorway appeared Miss Permain in her long white, Victorian nightdress and a candle in her hand. She was frightening the life out of me. Yes.
Miss Permain was
She was a resident.
One of the residents.
She was one of the residents, very elderly resident. Yes.
But despite the changes, the inevitable changes, thinking back to the very early days, do you think Leonard Cheshire's spirit lives on here at Lee Court? It must do.
Well, certainly when I was here 2 years ago, when I was still on the staff, it certainly was, yes.
And what do you think that spirit is? Do you think it's to do with giving residents individuality? Do you think it's giving them the opportunity to live an independent life? Do you think it's been that from the beginning? Do you think his aims changed over his life, perhaps?
Well, I think they must have done, because as things have progressed, and there's been more things available for disabled, so obviously I think his aims had to change. But I would think the fact of giving them independence must be a really main point. And because when you think, I mean, I can think of one young man that we had here, who his parents had kept him in a back room because he was born disabled, and so they sort of kept him tucked away in a back room. And then the parents died, of course, and so he was put in, the young man in his late 30s, I suppose he was, tucked away in this back room. Parents die, he's put into a geriatric ward in a hospital. And you could imagine what that was. Anyhow, a resident and some staff from here went down. He was found down there, and we were asked to take him, and he came and lived here. And I mean, how he blossomed over the years. I mean, to have a room with his own belongings, to be able to go out. And the first time he ever went out, you couldn't get him out to start with. I think he felt that if he went out, that we weren't going to have him back again or something. But you could understand this. Anyhow, one day I said, look, we're going to Brighton. I'll take you, Jimmy. I'll come with you. I said, no, I've got to come back. I said, I'm not going to stay at Brighton. Oh, well, he'd come. So we took him to Brighton, and his highlight of the day was sitting on the front, and there were two little girls on the beach, running in and out of the water, screaming like children, oh, I'm getting wet. And he sat for about an hour watching these two little girls just trotting in and out of the water. And you'd have thought you'd given him the top brick off the chimney. And I bought him one of those hats which says sort of kiss me quick or whatever it said on the front of it. And you'd think you really had done so much. And after that he began to go out, when he realised that you could go out and you could come back again.
Well, that is doing a lot for that particular person.
That's right, yes.
Well, what a lovely story to end on. Thank you, Peggie and Bill.